And I'll be moving on to my good friend Mike Adam Smasher with his 2 questions, the first of which is, what is your favorite film trilogy? Damn. And I thought the least favorite superhero question was going to be hard. Over the last week, after a month of going through the original series as a marathon with my sister, she and I started on the Star Trek movies, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is the inadvertent trilogy of Star Treks 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, it's a 3-part story. It continues on from the next. You begin with the death of Spock at the hands of the return of Khan. Once he is bested, you have the crew then in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, basically breaking every rule in the book to steal the Enterprise and bring Spock back. Kirk loses his son, who he only just found in the previous movie. And then, on top of that, after some months in exile on Vulcan in Star Trek 4, they have to save the Earth by going back in time, risking it all once again, and they do so successfully. This is just a brilliant 3-part arc for these characters, very entertaining, and I would say that would be a top-tier choice. Now, you also have classics like the original Star Wars trilogy. Indiana Jones especially is one that I love. The Back to the Future trilogy. These are all the top-tier ones for me as far as I'm concerned. I don't think I could actually pick like which one is better than the other. It basically would shift around depending on my mood or what I'm into at the particular moment. Lord of the Rings is another trilogy that is just solid entertainment. And even though people don't always necessarily consider it a trilogy, the Evil Dead trilogy is awesome for its various, gore and comedy and stuff like that. And that's probably the best way I could answer that question. Mike Adam Smasher's second question is, who's your favorite Star Trek villain? Well, definitely Khan is the top choice. I'm going to be going a little more in depth into why I like Khan in a separate video. So I kind of want to spin off from that question. Beyond Khan, what are some of my favorite villains in Star Trek? And I have to go back to TOS. 2 of my favorite all-time villains from TOS are 2 air quotes villains that aren't really villains. That is to say, the Telosians, for example, in the Menagerie and in the original pilot, The Cage. It looks like they're doing something very ominous and evil. They're forcing Captain Christopher Pike into this sort of exile to repopulate their world and all of this stuff. So it looks like they're very evil. But at the same time, as the story unfolds, you begin to realize that they're suffering. They no longer possess the knowledge they need to keep their species going and their world alive, and so you feel sympathy for them. They're not exactly villains. Same goes with the episode, I can't think of the name of the episode or the creature, but the rock creature in the one episode where essentially you have these miners and their men are getting killed off, and it turns out that they have stumbled onto the eggs of this creature. She's the last of her kind, and she's trying to protect her offspring. So you have this meeting of the minds between Spock and this creature, and they find out, oh, wait, this creature's actually trying to protect itself. We were in the wrong. And that's something they also vaguely sort of get into with the Gorn. When the Gorn first appear, when Kirk has to fight the Gorn on Cestus 3, essentially you have this character, this species. Yes, of course, they have been used in further Star Trek stories more as a villainous thing, a villainous device, if you will, but from the get-go, they were misunderstood villains that aren't really kind of villains. And I think those stories are the most compelling, where you've heard it said before about villains, the archetypal villain is a villain who doesn't conceive of the fact that what he's doing is evil or wrong. As far as he's concerned, he or she is doing the best thing for their surroundings, or whatever it is that they're trying to bring forth or do is for the greater good in their mind, in their concept. And that is an intriguing aspect of it. But I love even more when we find out that actually it isn't that they're evil. It isn't that they are villains and that kind of thing. I loved in the original series their exploration of that. And so as far as villains go in Star Trek, those are 2 of my favorites. Again, Telosians are just probably top tier because we've seen so little of them, and as it turned out, they weren't really villains. So thank you, Mike Adam Smasher, my good friend. Moving on to Senor Nerd with 2 questions. What is your opinion of Chris Claremont? Now, here is a name I've heard all through growing up. I mean, when I was getting into comics and X-Men specifically, this was a name that was synonymous with what I was reading at the time. And the thing is, it was at a time in my life when my life began to take a tumultuous turn. So I only have vague memories of what I've read, and I'll admit I don't know much about the man himself. I had to actually sort of look him up because I only really knew his name from comics that I've read that I only vaguely remember anymore. But it seems to be that the consensus is this guy made women strong in comics in the Marvel continuity, and we wouldn't have strong female leads necessarily as strong as they are, as independent as they are. And especially we have this upcoming all-female X-Men title coming out soon. I don't think we'd have that without people like Claremont. So that is the closest I can get to an opinion on him. Definitely an awesome cat. And yeah, so the second question from Senor Nerd is, do you have a favorite YouTube movie reviewer? Not really. I mean, to be honest, and this is going to sound kind of sacrilegious being that I do YouTube reviews and stuff like that and commentaries, but I don't really take that kind of stuff seriously because I'm just, I don't know, I'm independently minded, I guess you could say. Sometimes I will go into, movie reviewers like the Schmoes Know and Jeremy Johns and stuff like that, and I'll be interested to hear what they have to say. Catherine Reitman is another one, as far as, more famous or infamous, depending, movie reviewers go on YouTube, that kind of thing. But I like to hear more so from my peers, the Real Manos, Mike Adams Smasher, Senor Nerd even, who asked the question, Comics Kid 2099, Pop Culture Diva 42. I like hearing what you guys have to say, and because I feel like your opinions are going to be closer to mine, if anything else. And, I mean, it all comes down to the fact that the only way I'm going to know how a movie is if I experience it myself. If I have interest in it and I go into it, reviews really have little to do with that at all whatsoever. I like getting perspective on things from others that, I respect the opinions of. And beyond that, I don't take it, I take it all with a grain of salt, put it that way. So I never have developed a favorite movie reviewer or any kind of reviewer, really. So, yeah, I mean, that's about the best approximation of an answer I can give you, Senor Nerd. Thank you for your two questions. Moving on to D-Rezi. First question, what's your opinion on Doc Ock being Superior Spider-Man? Now, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but more specifically to do with Doc Ock, I haven't read Superior Spider-Man as yet, but I love the concept, frankly. The concept of this excites me. This is something that just feels like old school comics. I mean, if this was done in the 70s, everybody would be calling this a classic story, as far as Peter Parker dying, his soul being switched with Doc Ock, and Doc Ock now being, the inhabitant of Peter Parker's body, being Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man. To me, that is an absolutely fascinating story. It really excited me. It's the first story that's come along since the New 52 with DC on the Marvel side that has actually really piqued my interest and really wanted me, made me want to rather pick up Spider-Man comics and get back into Marvel because it's just a really intriguing thing. I know this is only temporary. They killed off Superman. He was going to come back. He did come back. Peter Parker is not dead forever. Peter Parker has existed for decades, and he will be back shortly in, the wink of an eye, basically. This is a very compelling story concept as far as I'm concerned. Taking your worst foe, taking your worst arch nemesis, the most infamous arch nemesis you have, and putting that person's consciousness into the hero's body, and the hero can't do anything about it. Wow. I mean, that is just insane. Now, is the actual story, is the actual comic series, however long this goes on, is it going to live up to that? I don't know. It's hard for me to say, being that I'm not reading it as yet. I do want to eventually, but Is it going to carry that weight all through it? I don't know. I can't really speak to that. That is the only gauge by which I think we can say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. If it turns out to be a really great story and one that we all remember, I mean, hell, a lot of Spider-Man fans are going to remember it, sure enough. But, I mean, if the story actually wraps up and the intricacies of it are really, well handled and stuff like that, then I would say it's probably going to be better in the long run. So, moving on to the second question from D. Resi. Are you looking forward to the Justice League movie given the news from last year? And I guess I have to say so-so, half and half, because it is somewhat exciting, I would say, to be able to see a movie with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, and as far as I'm told, that's all we're going to be seeing. No Aquaman, which is a big bummer. But I mean, seeing those characters in a team movie would be awesome, frankly. But at the same time, we're talking about Warner Brothers, the WB, and they haven't had the greatest track record with DC Comics properties. Hands down, you look at Superman Returns being a yawn fest. You look at Green Lantern. I loved the Green Lantern movie, frankly. I was okay with the casting. I loved the overall movie. There were some issues that it had, minor ones by comparison to some other movies, but this is a movie that is wholly bashed by audiences, and I think unfairly and unrightly so, and that's the problem. They don't really give enough forethought the way the Marvel Studios movies have with their characters. They are really handling their characters really well on the Marvel side, and I have yet to see, I mean, you can't attribute the Dark Knight trilogy and its success to WB. That was Christopher Nolan. That was the actors chosen for those roles. That isn't WB. And WB needs to put the Justice League project in the hands of somebody who is going to deliver that kind of, storytelling, that kind of impactful characterization and whatever like that. I mean, that's the hope I have, the highest hope I have for Man of Steel. I want this one to be for Superman what the Dark Knight trilogy was for Batman. I want this to make Superman relevant again. And so I guess you could say cautiously excited about a Justice League movie. I really see that it could fall apart in many different ways, and I hope against hope that it doesn't. So yeah, thank you, D. Resi, for your two questions. Moving on to Superman is Best with your two questions, the first of which is, what are your feelings so far on the Man of Steel movie? I really love everything I'm hearing about it. Hands down, every little bit of news I've heard about it has excited me, from casting to the story to the inspiration behind it. There was an interview recently with Russell Crowe that just impressed the hell out of me as far as they get Superman. They get how to make him relevant in this day and age, because the world would not react the way they did in the 1970s Christopher Reeve movie. They wouldn't just be accepting to this guy in blue tights throwing criminals around. The world would be frightened by a Superman showing up, and it would take possibly an alien invasion that he would have to fend off to earn the trust. And even then, the trust wouldn't necessarily be earned for everybody on the planet. But it seems like they get it. They get the gravitas this character embodies. They get the level of emotion and hardship he carries on his shoulders. These powers, they are a gift, but they can also be a burden, because he will be judged, he will be feared, and you don't want to experience that. As somebody who has kind of a rocker-esque lifestyle, or at least, clothing style, all black all the time, you have people who will stop in their tracks, gawk and gape at you when you're just doing your shopping. And so I feel like on a very minor scale, I can relate to that. And that's very compelling when it's the world's greatest superhero. So I would say unbridled excitement, highest of hopes for this movie. I hope it reinvigorates Superman for audiences going far beyond just the comic book and comic book movie fans. I hope it validates Superman for audiences again, the way the Dark Knight trilogy has for Batman. So Superman is Best's second question is, what is your thoughts on how Superman is portrayed in the New 52? Interesting question. I haven't really read a lot of it. I would have to say, hands down, I loved more so the Action Comics New 52 take on Superman. He was very cavalier. It really calls back on the original Superman concept and how he was portrayed in the 30s. And I don't know, there's something about that I just get a big kick out of. I really enjoyed it. Now, the same cannot entirely be said for the straight Superman comic title for New 52. There was a great mystery going on in there, but I mean, as compared to the Action Comics take in the New 52 on Superman, the Superman title was just kind of boring. It was interesting, but it was boring at the same time. It did not have this lively attitude about it that at least the Action Comics side of it for New 52 really took off with, and really, I mean, it took off flying, put it that way, whereas you had the Superman title and it just didn't. It just didn't really soar. I did think it was interesting that the Superman who shows up in the Justice League title is a bit cocky. He's kind of the bridge between what you get in Action Comics and the regular Superman title. And I did think that was kind of funny. I mean, when he's basically opening a can of whoop-ass on Batman and Green Lantern in that first couple of issues, I did get a kick out of it. I did think it was a little going against type with Superman, but I could swallow it because I understood this to be a sort of reimagining, and it didn't wipe away from me anything that had come before. So I would say overall the New 52 take on Superman has been more good than bad. That's kind of where I'll leave it. So yeah, thank you, Superman is Best, for your 2 questions. And finally, the final 2 questions for this Q&A is from Jenny Omange. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And so your 2 questions are as follows. Question number 1, as a writer, from whom do you take inspiration? I really, genuinely, I take inspiration from just about everything. I mean, from comic books to Star Trek novels to watching Star Trek and Doctor Who, characters like Superman, the Doctor from Doctor Who, James T. Kirk and Spock, and Dr. McCoy from Star Trek. All of these things really inspire me, and it's funny where inspiration can come. I mean, you could be standing in like a checkout aisle in a store, and something will occur to you based on, like, you'll see a kid arguing with his parent, and you'll think, you know, that's a good way to bring across an idea in a story. Or you might be, you know, flipping around watching TV and you'll land on a commercial, and all of a sudden that commercial will inspire something. And the worst part of it is when you are going to bed, and these are when all the great ideas come up. I mean, everything from like the last month will come flooding into your head with a bunch of different inspirational aspects that you could add to stories. Entire story concepts can come from this. And that is the most challenging because, of course, you know, at least me, more times than not, I'm like, oh, I'll remember it tomorrow. It's such a great idea. I won't forget it. Wake up the next day. What the hell was it I was trying to write down? So, yeah, I mean, for me, I take inspiration from pretty much everything. And so the final question from Jenny Omange, question number 2, is what are your thoughts about the Disney Star Wars thing, and what would you like to see in a future trilogy? I didn't really have that big of a problem with Disney purchasing Lucasfilm and Star Wars and all of that. I'm really hopeful that they're going to do something good with it. Almost anything is going to be better than the Star Wars prequels, even though I can watch them and enjoy them, aspects of them anyway. I think, you know, as far as the Star Wars universe goes, it's onward and upward. You can only get better, with hope anyway. And as far as a new trilogy, I mean, for a new trilogy, I'd love to see, at least in the start of it, the return of Luke Skywalker, you know, maybe Leia, Han, Chewie, that kind of thing. The characters we know and love, I'd love to see those actors sort of do a swan song, if you will, for their respective roles. And I don't necessarily need them to carry on through the entire new trilogy, but I'd love to see them in some capacity. Now, you know, beyond that, though, I really haven't given a lot of thought to a new trilogy. There's a number of different stories they could tell, you know, from the kids of Han and Leia to Luke Skywalker's children. I think he has a couple. And, you know, exploring that side of it could be intriguing. I really have no idea. You know, the news just came down as of the time of this recording that J.J. Abrams is going to be directing it. And I really don't have much to say on that either. It's kind of like, all right, whatever. We'll see. It could be good, it could suck, but, you know, as I heard Pop Culture Diva say in the Q&A with Senior Nerd, they could have done better, but they could have done a lot worse at the same time, and I have to agree with that. And as far as Star Wars in general, I mean, I have to go back to an idea that was inspired by my good friend Mike Adams Smasher. I want to see a Boba Fett movie. I'd love to see a Boba Fett trilogy centering around that character, you know, the character's adventures in between the other Star Wars movies, maybe from the extended Star Wars universe. I would love to see an all-out, you know, basically space western kind of story. I mean, that's kind of what was the inspiration for the original Star Wars trilogy. And in a sense, that's also kind of what, you know, was the inspiration for Star Trek. I would love to see that. I would love to see Boba Fett just tearing ass through the Star Wars universe. And I think you can get a lot of story mileage out of that. So, yeah, that's pretty much my answer for that, and that is my answer for all of these questions. I thank everybody who decided to submit questions, and everybody who has subsequently decided to listen to this. I ended up having to record this in 14 separate 3-minute parts on my mobile device that I then have edited together, and it took forever. So I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this. I'd love to hear from you guys, your thoughts on any of these questions or any of the things I've said in response to them in the comments below as usual. And otherwise, I hope you're all doing well, so I'll catch you later. Peace.